Hey, hello, good evening. How are you all? Good, I'm glad you're here. If you would please turn off the ringers on your cell phones. Thank you. If you're not on our email list and would like to be, the ugly box over there is where you put your little slips with your email address on them. Sean loves that box for some reason. So next Tuesday, March 10th, the Wheeling Poetry Series returns to welcome Pittsburgh-based poet Jim Daniels. The poetry series is curated and hosted by West Virginia Poet Laureate Mark Harshman. Then next Thursday at 7 p.m. at People's University, Marine Biology Class 4, instructor Dr. Nicholas Tucker will discuss an evolutionary U-turn, animals that went back to the ocean. Nick is a postdoctoral researcher with the Gulf Ecosystem Initiative. Tonight we have instructor Daniel Abel. He's a distinguished professor emeritus of marine science at Coastal Carolina University in Conway, South Carolina. He earned his Master in Science in Marine Biology from the College of Charleston and his PhD in Marine Biology from the University of California, San Diego's Scripps Institution of Oceanography. His research focuses on the physiology and ecology of sharks and rays. Books include Shark Biology and Conservation, Tooth and Claw, Top Predators of the World, The Lives of Sharks, Sharkpedia, Shark, the Illustrated Biography, and the forthcoming Biology of the Skates and Rays. He has been an award-winning environmental columnist, and his annual Biology of Sharks course, held at the Bimini Biological Field Station in the Bahamas, has run for nearly 30 years. He has appeared on CNN, CBS, NBC, the Weather Channel, and live National Geographic documentaries. And now, People's University live stream. He is a native South Carolinian. Please welcome Dr. Daniel Abel.
Thank you. Thank you all very much. I hope you can hear me. Thank you for that introduction, Julia. I think it's a bit undeserving and overwhelming, but thank you anyway. Today I'm going to talk about the lives of sharks and rays, a dive into what fascinates us about these magnificent beasts and why they're critical to ocean health. I'm really sorry I can't be there in person with you. One of my joys when I give these presentations is interacting with people after I speak. It's not going to be possible. You have some opportunities to ask questions, but it's a slightly different way of doing things. Before I get into the talk, I want to share something with you. I'm trying to meet a deadline tomorrow to send a manuscript in for another book, and I needed one little fact on angel sharks, and my fingers got ahead of my brain a little bit, and in typing up angel sharks, let's see. Apparently, I hit the space bar one character too late, and so I got some Christmas music. So, at any rate, what I'd like to do first is transport you all to the Bahamas, where for the last 30 years I've taken my students, get you in a frame of mind, maybe a little bit from the, I guess the slightly overcast and rainy Wheeling that you all are in right now, and show you a few videos before we talk a little more about sharks. Let me try that one more time and see if it's going to play a little bit better. Yeah, for some reason it's chopping up a little bit. These are some bull sharks that my students are swimming with. I'm sorry this is coming out like this. I played this right beforehand and it was fine. If you come to the location I'm at now in Pawleys Island, South Carolina, you'll be able to see scenes like this. All right. Having some technical difficulties. Let me restart this really quickly. I hope that. So this is a black tip shark that you might see swimming close to shore. This is the phenomenon that you'll see if it plays a little bit better, that few people are lucky enough to see. And these are black tip or spinner sharks that spin out of the water. And let's try this one more time and see if it's going to show. If not, I will come back to these in a minute because I think it's worth maybe even restarting the show to see it. Um, but these animals will spin out of the water. Here's a artist rendition of this. And if you're lucky enough to see this, it's a once in a lifetime phenomenon. And nobody knows why these animals are doing it. Some people think maybe they're expressing some sort of dominance hierarchy. They could actually be communicating with each other. They might be shedding parasites, or they might just be. I like to think they're just expressing their exuberance for being black tip sharks spinning out of the water. There's one. You can see that one. Okay, so that showed up. Um, let's move on to something else then, and away from some of these videos. What I'd like to do in my talk today is give you a quick introduction to elasmobranchology. And elasmobranchs are the group to which sharks, skates, and rays belong to. And we'll tell you a little bit about some myths about these animals, some of their characteristics that define what they are and separate them from the other major group of fishes, the bony fishes, and some of the threats that they face. And they face extraordinary threats like every living thing on the planet does, but there are some specific to sharks and rays. And then, if I can get the PowerPoint to work a little bit better, some of the videos, I'm going to give you a little bit of an overview of a field trip. And if at that time, I'll restart this for you. But I can tell you a little bit about the methods and what we've learned studying sharks over the last 30 years um, in coastal South Carolina. But the first thing I want you to do is imagine a shark. And my guess is that if you think of a shark, you're going to think of something like this. This is a bronze whaler in the Sardine runoff of South Africa. And while you're looking at this, I should tell you, you'll notice that almost all of my photographs are courtesy of somebody. And that's because um, when I'm in the water with sharks, I'm either looking at my students to make sure, in part, that they're safe from the sharks, but mainly to make sure that the sharks are safe from them. So um, my friends provided these with me, and these are in many of my books. So this is a bronze whaler. You might have seen something like this. This is a oceanic white tip. And back, gosh, 45 years ago, when I certified to scuba dive, my instructor told me if you're ever in the water with one of these, they are so dangerous that you should draw your diver's knife and kill your buddy because only one of you is getting out alive. It turns out that that's hyperbole. These animals are oceanic sharks. Oceanic sharks, um, they have to consider anything they see as food because they live in a very food poor environment. And so um, they have been implicated in shipwreck victims, demise. And so they are dangerous animals, but not nearly as much as my dive instructor told me. I'm sure you might have thought of something like this, right? This is the beast that we all knew back in 1975 in Jaws. This is the great white shark. Or you might have thought of this. This is a beautiful animal we've had the privilege of swimming with several times in the Bahamas. This is a tiger shark. Or maybe this animal. This is a fearsome animal, a bull shark. And finally, what many consider, including Hemingway, the most magnificent beast in the sea. This is the short fin mako. I call this the paragon of predatory prowess. Just a beautifully streamlined, high performance predator. But when you look at all these, if these are the sharks you're thinking of, and I think Julia might be thinking of another one because she already told me what shark she likes. But you might thus conclude that a typical shark is large, gray. If my PowerPoint works, be prepared because there's going to be a loud noise. In fact, a typical shark in Casablanca, Morocco, about 10 years ago, this is a gulper shark, but a typical shark is small and brown and lives in the deep sea. And over half of them live in water like this Cuban dogfish. And it's a dead giveaway that this is a deep sea shark because they have these blue-green eyes that harvest the light that's remaining, the quality of light that gets to their depths. They're able to take advantage of those wavelengths. And this is another deep sea shark that's more typical than not. And that you look at that head, I've actually had nightmares of that little head. It's diabolical. It looks like, it could be I don't know, the stuff of nightmares. But it's also clownish looking. This is a cookie cutter shark, and it's about a meter long. It's like a sausage of a shark. And we'll tell you why it's a shark in a minute. And it makes its living by attracting big things to it, like whales and seals and other marine mammals, even big fish, who think they're going to eat it. And then it accelerates around and sinks those lower teeth into the flesh, and then grabs it and sinks the upper jaw into it and does a death spin, and basically then just takes a chunk out. And the potential predator is now the prey. And this is what a cookie cutter scar looks like. These are on yellowfin tuna in a fish market in Honolulu, Hawaii. I took pictures of. So these were probably done while the animals were on a long line, but you see the scar anyway. Talk about that scar right there. Okay, how about another statement about sharks? They're all apex predators, right? I hear that all the time. Well, again, no sound associated with this, but most sharks are in fact not apex predators. They're one or two levels down on the food chain, like this leopard shark here. And this is a typical food pyramid, sort of a simplified, stylized pyramid of food relationships in a marine ecosystem. And you can see at the top is an apex predator, in this case, a white shark. We'll see in a minute, it's not always an apex predator. Only a handful of shark species are apex predators, and some of them not even all the time. The next level down is what most sharks are. They're mid-level predators. They're still predators, but they're called mesopredators. And then you go to the third level down, and we have that black silhouette there. That's a whale shark, and it's a plankton eater. It's a filter feeder, but filter feeders are still predators. So you can see that all sharks aren't at the top of that food chain. Baby sharks certainly are. This is the a little tiger shark that we caught in Bimini, a newborn tiger shark. Formidable little shark, but hardly an apex predator at that size. And in the right is a shark that is almost a pest in the local waters where I used to live in Pawleys Island. This is the baby Atlantic sharpnose, and it's food for a lot of bony fish and a lot of sharks, other sharks as well. And then again, here's the three plankton-eating sharks that are even lower on the food chain. Whale shark, a basking shark as we go clockwise, and then megamouth at the bottom. So one of the things I said I do is tell you about the importance of sharks. So since they're all predators, predators play disproportionately important roles in ecosystems. And it's said they do two main things. And these are overgeneralizations, but that they control the populations of their prey, which makes sense, right? The prey have to be controlled. In many cases, they would reproduce out of control if they didn't. And they influence the evolution of the prey, which means natural selection, that they would prey upon those animals that may be less fit, that probably should be removed from the gene pool so that the populations of the prey remain healthy. So if sharks aren't all apex predators, it means they have predators of their own. And the top left here is the bonnethead that we had on a long line that had a chunk of it removed. There is an alligator eating a shark, a pinniped eating one, a seabird, insulting it is to have a little seabird eat a little shark, another marine mammal. And then this is a white shark. And I'll tell you about the white shark that had some of its organs removed. Back over a decade ago, in False Bay, South Africa, two orcas invaded the area, and locals nicknamed them port and starboard because of the way their dorsal fins tilted, one to the left, port, one to the right, starboard. And they learned very quickly that they could overpower a white shark. So, mentioned a white shark as an apex predator. There's nothing matching the orca in terms of it being an apex predator in the marine environment. Sperm whales are pretty close, but I think orcas are right up there. And they would kill the white sharks and remove only their livers and some of the other organs and leave the rest of the carcass, which would wash up on shore. As a result, a lot of the white sharks left the area, and it really upended both the economy of the area, because they were really dependent upon ecotourism, and the ecology as well, because white sharks play a role as predators do. Now, I witnessed predation on sharks in one of the Nat Geo documentaries that we filmed when we were given a dead fine-toothed shark to use as bait. And anyone who fishes for sharks know that the best bait for sharks is small sharks. So we put that on the line and we waited an hour and pulled it up. And this is what we got. So you can see the smallest head is the fine-toothed shark. And it's a rather gruesome picture as I look at it. But then you see another slightly larger head that, if you look closely, is not connected to a body. That's a sandbar shark that ate the fine-toothed shark. And then a bull shark that was, several times bigger than either of them decided it wanted the sandbar shark. And if I can get the videos to work a little bit later, and I will reload them to see if they do, you'll hear what I said at the moment, and I knew it was going to be in the documentary, and that is it's a shark eat shark world. All right, another statement about sharks is they're mindless eating machines likely to attack you, right? We see that all the time. If you saw the movie Jaws, that was the impression you were left by it, and we know again that's yet another myth. The more sharks are studied, the more biologists and behaviorists conclude that they exhibit surprisingly complex behaviors. In fact, they have relatively large brains. Now, not quite as large as most mammals, and the parts of the brains that are large aren't the parts associated with cognition like in mammals, but they're still large brains. And they don't include humans in their diet. We'll finish talking about that. But sharks are capable of learning. I remember seeing a video back in the 80s when I was in graduate school, a shark fetching, actually it was a cow-nosed ray, fetching something and bringing it back to a scientist. They learn, they can remember and recall, and they can recognize familiar individuals. So some sharks like to hang out with sharks that they've hung out with before. And Louis Armstrong is pictured here, and I hope this audience recognizes him because most of my students have no idea who he is. He's there because sharks, horn sharks, Port Jackson sharks, were taught to recognize jazz. So, and then we see a couple of pictures of people swimming with sharks. This in the lower right is one my friend Leslie sent me of this man who was afraid of sharks and dived with a lemon shark here. It's not a good idea to do what he's doing. We discourage that kind of thing, but it just shows, sort of dispels the myth that they're mindless eating machines. And so there you see a tiger shark and a couple of nurse sharks, and the tiger shark is accompanying people on a dive, and it's it's not being aggressive at all. It's bullying the nurse sharks, but it's perfectly harmless to the diver. Okay, with that as an introduction, let's discuss what makes a shark a shark. And the first thing is that a shark or a ray, and I'm sorry, I've been talking about sharks mostly. We're going to talk about rays as well, and the distinction between a shark and a ray, who are each other's closest relatives, I'll talk about in a second. But sharks and rays diverged evolutionarily about 230 million years ago. But they came from the same lineage that differs from the lineage of other fishes. So they're both fish, and a fish like this is a porbeagle here, as an aquatic vertebrate that has gills for respiration and fins for locomotion. And the distinguishing characteristic when you look at a shark, besides it just looking like a shark, is those 5 gill slits on either side, bilateral gill slits. Some sharks have 7, or 6 or 7 rather. Now, you can tell a shark from a ray pretty easily, right? Rays are dorsal ventrally flattened. Um, but one of the big things is that those gill slits, as in the spotted eagle ray, are on the underside in rays, whereas they're bilateral on the flanks in sharks. Another characteristic of the shark is this asymmetrical tail fin. And the upper lobe, which provides, and the whole tail fin provides thrust for the shark, but the upper lobe, to push such a muscular, heavy animal, needs to be supported. And what you can see in the inset there is the vertebral column goes all the way to the tip of the upper lobe. Now, the other aspect of this was when I wrote my first shark book about 6 or 7 years ago. My wife said, "You know, you're going to have to sign some of these." And I said, "I can't sign. My signature is terrible." She said, "Well, let's figure out a new one for you." So we figured out that I can make my L in Able more look like the tail fin of a shark, and I can do that repeatedly now. Um, Sharks are distinctive in that they have a skeleton made out of a form of connective tissue that's lighter and more flexible than bone, but almost just as strong. It's called cartilage. So this is a baby lemon shark on the flats, and this is a CT scan, a colorized CT scan on the left, showing all the cartilage. You can see the green vertebral column and the pink fins and the red skull and the sort of bluish, light bluish gills. You can also see a mohara, which is a fish that this animal ate that was in its stomach that came out in the CT scan. And this is a batoid or a stingray, showing that its cartilaginous skeleton as well. Another very important distinguishing characteristics of sharks, and one that distinguishes them from 99% of bony fishes, is that they use internal fertilization. So in bony fish, the female will deposit her eggs externally, and the male will fertilize them. And except for a few like fishes, like some aquarium fishes, like guppies and mollies, that do internal fertilization. This is the norm for sharks. And they have claspers, the males do, and they invert them, insert them into the female, and then they splay out to anchor themselves in the female. And that then allows the sharks to have embryos that are born at a large size, even though there's only a few of them, compared to like, an eighth or a 16th of an inch larvae of a bony fish. Larva of a bony fish. The other aspect of sharks that makes a shark is that they have multiple rows of teeth. And if there's any dentists in the audience, it's called polyphyodonty, and it refers to the fact that they're loosely embedded in collagen and on a conveyor belt. And they frequently lose them. And, as a young student, I wondered, I knew in evolution that energy is not wasted. And I thought, this seems like an awful wasteful process to continually produce and lose teeth. I mean, we're talking about on the order of every few weeks they lose them. It enables them to have sharp teeth, and so it must work. And to understand the importance of teeth, sharp teeth, you only need to look at terrestrial mammals. And if a terrestrial mammal, like a lion or a tiger, loses one of its big canine teeth, there's a high likelihood it's not going to survive. It simply can't do what it needs to do to feed itself, especially an older animal. But even if a younger animal hits a bone of one of its prey and shatters one of its canine teeth, it's probably not going to live very long. So what you see here is a lemon shark. Actually, this one just about bit my foot off in the bow of the boat I was working it up on. And it left some of its teeth embedded in the wooden front of the boat. We didn't worry about it because once we released the animal, we knew those other teeth that were behind it would simply move into place, and it would not be at a competitive disadvantage. Another shark characteristic Not all sharks, but some sharks have a third eyelid. The, the other two are fixed, so you wouldn't even know they had those other two eyelids. But this is called a nictitating membrane, and it's covered in scales. And what it does is that it protects the eye when the animal's um, fears, experiences some danger or it's eating. And on the right is a tiger shark. The left is an Atlantic sharpnose shark. And you can see if you're ever swimming and that shark swims by and does that to its eye, it either thinks you're going to be on the menu or it thinks you think it's going to be on the menu. All right. I couldn't hear you all before, so you're going to have to take this pop quiz by the honor system. Um, but you can explain this. This is in the Myrtle Beach area at one of the beachwear stores. They have this shark sitting up front, and I didn't have the heart to tell him. Number one, it has only four gill slits, so it's not a shark. It has one row of spiky teeth, so it's not a shark. Um, the pectoral fins, the fins on the side, are really wimpy for sharks. Um, but you know what? This eye, this sort of cat's eye, um, wouldn't be on this shark. But there are a variety of different pupil shapes in sharks, and this is one of them. All right. Let's talk a little bit about human impact. We want to talk some more about fascinating aspects of sharks, but we need to we need to at least acknowledge some of the threats to their existence. And about one third of sharks and rays are listed as um, threatened by the the International Union for Conservation of Nature, and that means they're critically endangered or vulnerable. And the biggest threat right now to sharks, believe it or not, is overfishing. And overfishing has four components to it. One is when they're accidentally caught on gear that's intended for something else. And frequently they're dead. Sometimes they're used, but they're dead when that happens. Um, Targeted commercial fishing for shark meat and fins. And notice I put fins in with shark meat, and there's a separate category called finning. Um, in lots of areas, it's legal to catch and eat sharks. And if the fishing is managed and it's a sustainable fishery, the fins should not be excluded from being used, at least in the opinion of most shark biologists, in the shark fin soup industry, which is a delicacy and a rite of passage serving that in Asia. So the illegal removal of fins is what's called finning. And that practice typically is at sea. The shark carcass is typically thrown back into the water, often with the animal still alive. It does not regrow their fins, like some people have said. So the sharks die a horrifying death, and then the fins are dried and sold, you know, um, often illegally for shark fin soup. And even recreational fishing is a little bit of a threat to sharks. We used to think, I wouldn't say a little bit, in some cases, a big threat, but we used to think that commercial fishing, was orders of magnitude worse than recreational fishing on its impact on fisheries. And that's probably still true, but recreational fishing does have impacts. Then there's the rest of the laundry list of threats to sharks. Habitat destruction, like dredging, like commercial fishing that destroys coral reefs, like just dredging of ports. And then there's marine pollution. We could talk about that for a while. I'll talk a little bit about plastics, but um, all this information I can tell you is pretty much widely available, and in at least a couple of my books I've got information on that in there. And then biodiversity loss. So um, this is all of these affect the animal's biodiversity, but not just the sharks, but loss of biodiversity in their whole ecosystem, their prey, and the mix of animals and plants in their ecosystem. And finally, I put this last only because I sometimes can be an evangelist for having people understand what climate change is and that it exists and it's not controversial and it's not a political issue. People make it that way, but it isn't. And if we're going to argue, we could argue about what to do about it, but not about that it exists. Um, but it's still a little bit early to be having the same kind of impacts on sharks as overfishing is. We're seeing that it's affecting their migrations. We're seeing that the acidity that climate change is, or at least that carbon dioxide, greenhouse gases are causing, can affect lots of their developmental processes. This is going to play out, and it's going to climb up in importance over the in subsequent decades. And this is a diagram from one of my books just showing um, the ways sharks are caught on long lines, in gill nets, in trawls, and then the bottom left is ghost fishing nets. And these are nets that are abandoned at sea that continue to fish and kill animals. Um, this is a whale shark that was caught in a purse seiner for tuna. I took this picture in Hong Kong in some of the dried seafood markets, showing the shark fins for sale at several $100s per pound. These are blue sharks that were legally caught in Cadiz, Spain, in a fish market. You can see their fins have been removed and that they will be then used for something else. And blue sharks are heavily fished, but we'll see in a second they're odd among sharks in that they are capable of reproducing pretty quickly. And a short fin mako in that same Cadiz fish market. And this is in Casablanca. You can see some very young makos. These are maybe a year old, maybe a little bit older. On the bottom, you can see how beautifully streamlined they are. And then small spotted cat sharks above those. And unless you think it's only sharks, rays are also endangered. These are devil rays in Sri Lanka, which had their gill rakers removed to be used in Chinese medicine. And then in the U.S. lobstering industry, little skates are used as lobster bait, and they are overfished as well. Yeah, and among the most critically endangered of the sharks and rays is this animal, and this is in fact, this is, sort of a shark wannabe. It's a sawfish. But if you looked at it closely, you'd see the gills are on the underside, so it's not a shark, it's a ray. That's my co-author, Dean Grubbs there, who's always just one swipe of that thing from getting impaled by it because those teeth are really, really sharp. But it's been heavily overfished. Its habitat's been destroyed. People love to, if you're in bars in many coastal areas, they're as curios on the walls. And so these animals are slowly recovering, but they're critically endangered. And then there's plastic. This is the Agbogbloshie toxic waste disposal and recycling area, and I'm being sarcastic, in Accra, Ghana, and just showing the plastics and the mass of plastics that enter the sea annually is it's mind-boggling. And plastics have impacts at several levels. One is they can be broken down into microplastics that can get into the animals' bodies, but there's also a relatively recent impact, and that's entanglement. So this is probably now close to 8 or 9 years ago. We caught a sandbar shark. Those two of my graduate students. And you can see there's a ring around its gills. And this was a plastic packaging strap that was strangling the animal. And we were able to take it off. The animal was robust. We could tell it was still healthy. It had not quite gotten to the point of killing the animal. And it had eaten, so it ate our bait. So we knew it was still feeding. And we were able to remove it and release it. And the sad part of the story is this isn't the only time we've caught animals entangled in plastic. And there's now published reports documenting the dozens and dozens and even hundreds of cases of this happening. Now, why are sharks and rays particularly vulnerable? It's because their life history characteristics are conservative or slow, and they ally more with terrestrial mammals than they do with bony fish. They're slow growing, They reach sexual maturity late in life, like 15 years for the sandbar shark, like I just showed you. They have few offspring, some 7 or 8, sometimes every other year. And some of them are pregnant for a year, 2 years, and even 3 years for a deep sea shark. So these are all characteristics that don't allow them to bounce back from human threats. Um, and as we said, also they're top predators, and so there's fewer of them in most cases than there are other sharks in their ecosystem, or other fish rather in the ecosystem. Okay, let me tell you a little bit about the Coastal Carolina University Shark Project, and I'm gonna go rather quickly through the videos and hope that if I reboot this in a few minutes, I'll be able to show you some of the videos because I'm doing okay for time at the moment. We've been studying the sharks of coastal South Carolina for about 30 years, and we had several different projects going. We noticed in this small ecosystem, we were shocked that there were 13 different kinds of sharks potentially at the same time or overlapping with each other. And these are my students and me with some of the sharks. We used long lines to catch the animals, and in a long line, a shark will be attracted after just less than an hour typically. I mean, we usually soak them for about 45 minutes. We um, bring in the long line, and we have anywhere from 0 to 10 sharks on every 50 hook long line. There's one there, and like I said, I'm going to go through these rather quickly, just tell you about it rather than
Just the beginning.
then show you. When we get an animal, we bring it on board. Um, we measure it, identify it, note if it has any unusual characteristics, parasites, for example. We use passive tags on most of them, and that means somebody else has to catch that animal and report it to us or to the National Marine Fisheries Service. And if it's the National Marine Fisheries Service and somebody else catches it, we get a report like this. So number one at the top is an animal we tagged in 2022. And we've reported the animal's data. And then nearly a year later, about 100 miles away, somebody else caught it and saw our tag and estimated the length and the weight and probably released the animal. And it's something really afraid of animals because sharks because they are shark bites are low likelihood events. But I like this one. A student wrote in one of my term papers several years ago, you're more likely to be struck by, she meant to write lightning because that's what everyone says, but she wrote lighting. And I corrected her, and then I thought, you know what, she might be right. And the fact is, you are where you're sitting right now is probably more dangerous than swimming in the coast. Now, obviously, it's a little bit of hyperbole, but the point is the risks that we take every day are far more likely to hurt us than sharks are, even when we're swimming in the water with them. And most of the time, the bites and interactions are from our stupidity. This is, and I'm referring to myself now because that's me on the left, and in the bottom, I was teaching with a small sandbar shark. I refer to them as training sharks because they're so easy to handle, but this one decided it would bite my finger. And all it did was, I was glad I had gloves on, but all it did was leave like some paper cuts on me. The one below, fortunately, I moved my thumb afterwards and it didn't get it because that would have removed my thumb. And then there's my colleague, Dean, avoiding a great hammerhead.
Hey, Haley, can you tell us that?
This is me. Yeah, I'll have to.
Whoa.
Yeah, actually, this is better in slow motion, showing what a lemon shark that nearly got me. Just need to keep in mind that we are more danger to sharks than sharks are to us. So I love this cartoon because of it sort of reminds us who the apex predators are. And then my friend Leslie Rochat did this this little what appears to be a backwards poster. And some of you might remember when we had 35 millimeter slides and you give a slideshow, this might come out like this, but this is not This is intentionally backwards. And it says, warning, predators beyond this point. And she put it facing the sharks in the Two Oceans Aquarium in Cape Town, South Africa, to sort of send the message that sharks are more endangered by us than we are from them. Um, so I don't want to leave on bad news, and I hope I don't leave at all because I want to get some dollars for its meat. The cultural, spiritual, and it informs the public, it promotes our caring for their well-being and the environment in which they live. And so I want to end on that.
I was wondering. I was wondering, like I've always been taught that stingrays and sharks are two different things, that they weren't sharks. So, is a stingray a shark that devolved over evolution? Like it was a regular shark and then it flattened out into a stingray?
Yeah, so no, that's actually a pretty interesting question because we shark biologists call stingrays flat sharks because they basically are, and stingray biologists call sharks sausage stingrays. Um, they so both sharks and stingrays come from a lineage that is more like something called a chimera, which is looks very different than a shark and a stingray. And then when they diverged, they diverged from forms that were. And if you understand evolution at all and speciation, when there's a split and organisms are isolated from each other, they can evolve under very different environmental conditions. And so the niche that stingrays found for most of them was being on the sea floor, and that hastened their being flattened. So so whether there's not, I don't know enough to tell you how much flattened they were when they diverged, right? But that's probably, if you look back far enough, they were very different ecologically, and were separated from the sharks long enough that they populated themselves into a new series of. They diversified differently from the sharks.
Any other?
So,
I see. Yeah.
What are the ages of sharks? How long do they live?
good question. So some sharks don't live very long. Sandbar sharks might live 25, 30 years. White sharks, maybe that. The champion, though, the large shark, a large sluggish polar shark called the Greenland shark, was aged using radiocarbon dating by a laboratory. And they determined a median age, or mean age, maybe an average age, of almost 300 years. So it would have been around in Darwin's time. It would have witnessed a lot of events that none of us are old enough to witness. So they can be very old. But part of it is living in a very isolated cold water environment. Okay. Anything else? I'm gonna.
I
Fine.
actually have a question. How many sawtooth sharks are left?
So there are saw sharks, and they're doing okay. They look like sawfish, but they're smaller, and they have a long snout or rostrum. But the sawfish, it's hard to estimate how many. What we do know is that like the small tooth shark, sawfish, lives on the east coast of the U.S. and and South America as well, and its range has attenuated. It spends its young time, its juvenile time, in mangroves, and in South Florida, those are rare commodities because they're continually being overdeveloped. So they're found in the Everglades. Populations are coming back, but we really can't get a good indication of how many there are. It's very difficult to do that. There are ways that I could probably design an experiment to tell you how many bass are in a small lake, but extrapolating to the ocean is kind of hard.
What would you say is the fastest swimming shark, or one of the fastest swimming sharks?
Oh, well, by far the highest performance fasting swimming sharks are the mackerel sharks. And these are 5 species of sharks. The one that's best known is the white shark, but the short fin mako as well. And there's a long fin mako, there's a porbeagle, and a salmon shark. And they break the rules of being cold-blooded, right? Water saps the heat out of anything in it. And for a shark or a fish, it's even harder to keep that heat because the gills are so thin that when they get oxygen from the water, they lose all their heat. So marine mammals, for example, can stay warm because they've got blubber and fur, and birds have feathers, seabirds have feathers, and they breathe air. But it's hard for sharks and bony fish to stay warm. But the tunas and the mackerel sharks, among others, have devised a way to keep their body warm. And when they do that, it enables them to be faster swimmers. Chemical reactions go faster and warmer temperatures. The muscles contract with greater force. So a mako shark is probably the fastest shark and one of the fastest fish in the sea. All right, I'm opening this PowerPoint up one more time. Let's just see if it's going to open. All right, while we're doing this, if we have a few more minutes, I'm going to try sharing the screen one more time and see if I can get this to work. Because I've got a few things that I really would like for you to see.
Can you do a question while you're working?
Hold on.
Let- I think he wants to show.
Let me get this to work for some reason. Okay, now let me do the screen share again. Let's see, share, advance portion of screen, share. Well, that is the whole thing. Let's see if let's just try that and see if that's going to work. Maybe that'll be the easiest thing. That's still skipping. A little better, isn't it? So these are my students swimming with some Caribbean reef sharks. These are the bull sharks I told you about earlier. That's a black-tip shark in the shallows of Pawleys Island. These are some sandbar sharks around the piers. And they're talking about learning. These animals will eat some of the fish that are cleaned and thrown into the water, but you put a hook in it and they want no part of it. They've learned to avoid the hooks. And then these are the black tips spinning. All right, so you get to see that. And then these are some rays that we got to feed in the Bahamas. And to me, this is one of the scariest things we do. The animals have intact spines on them, but they're not aggressive in deploying them because we're feeding them. And then here's an underwater view of the same thing. You can see the spines are pretty potent on these animals. That's me. Very clumsily feeding them. Now, sharks do some damage to local shrimp nets where we are, and these are some black tip and sandbar sharks. As a shrimper pulls his net in, the sharks have an array of senses that allow them to detect the shrimp and the fish in the net, and they rip through the nets. And these poor shrimpers who are under attack from cheap imported shrimp, are having, high gas prices, etc., are having a hard time because of this. Let's see if I can. Sorry about this. I want to get to a couple of other things to show you. So this is the tiger shark I told you about earlier. I showed you that people are swimming with, and it bullies the little nurse sharks a little bit, but it's not a danger to the diver. This is one of the big three sharks in terms of shark attacks. You saw it deployed its nictitating membrane. And I got one or two more to show you. So this is a long lining trip that we take our students on, and they learn how to catch and handle and tag and release sharks. These are some small ones. We catch some big ones as well. Small sandbar sharks. And this is a nursery area for them, so they're protected from predation from some of the bigger sharks. Although some of the bigger sharks didn't get the memo that they weren't supposed to be there. And this is from the Nat Geo what we did.
Got it. So we got two. All right, so let's go pick up the second line. We've got a big lemon shark here.
And their last find of the day is the most remarkable.
All right. This is probably a 7.5 or 8 foot shark. You can see we put a small shark on the line for bait. Small shark took the bait, and then the bull shark took the small shark that ate the small shark we had on his bait. The shark eat shark world.
This is us retrieving a line.
Big fish.
And I want to show one more thing to you, and then this is my friend Leslie did this, and you'll recognize this as somewhat like the iconic scene from Jaws. So that sort of puts sharks in perspective. Shark bites in perspective. This is a lemon shark that nearly got my arm, and I think I showed you this one already. This is getting a lemon shark off the long line. Okay, I think with that I'll stop sharing. If there are any more questions, I'm sorry I've done this talk back video until tonight. I'm not sure. So
Probably on our end.
I have a question. What do you think of a local high school student who decided to do high-resolution matching of mako shark skin and then print out that skin on a 3D printer, put it on a cloth, and cover a mock-up of a plane wing and bring it into a wind tunnel at West Virginia University to determine and discover that it slightly improved its aerodynamic qualities?
Yeah, so I have colleagues who do similar kinds of things. If everyone heard the question, I missed part of it, but I think you're talking about just sort of an engineering modeling of using shark skin to understand a little bit about aerodynamics and hydrodynamics. Um, Shark skin is covered in little tiny scales. Actually, they can be quite big on some, called dermal denticles, and they're really like miniature teeth. And as an aside, I'll tell you that a lot of my students want to be bitten by a shark, but not too badly. They just want to say they've been bitten by a shark. So I tell them, rub their arm from front to back on a shark, and you get something like rug burn. It's called shark burn. And because they're miniature teeth, you can say then you've been bitten by a shark. But back to your question, this is nature-inspired design basically, and trying to solve problems that we may have technologically, but looking to nature for solutions. And again, I'm sorry I didn't hear everything you said. Some of was lost, but it sounds like that's the kind of thing, and I think that's a great avenue for creative thinking and for maybe potentially solving some problems.
Do sharks have to continuously move to breathe?
So yes and no. If you're an oceanic shark, if you don't move, you sink. And so the pectoral fins and that tail fin, and they sort of sometimes have a planing head, gives them lift. As you know, sharks don't have little internal balloons called air bladders like bony fish do. It's one of the reasons there's no real small sharks. They can't hover. But there are a bunch of sharks who have evolved the ability to pump water over their gills and stay stationary. The nurse shark, the horn sharks, the bamboo sharks, some of the cat sharks. So they do not have to swim continuously. But if you live in the open ocean and you're a shark and you don't swim continuously, if you ever go to an aquarium and you see something called a sand tiger, you notice them because they look like things. Internally, their largest embryo eats its siblings before it's born, and so it's born huge and it doesn't have any siblings. But what they do is they go to public in South Carolina low country, mostly temperate waters. My students, I call them, always recognize them because they have a dorsal fin bigger than any other shark. And they're frequently found in aquaria because they do very well there. And it's not a sand shark. Where I live now, everyone, all the locals, or where I used to live, where I am now, most of the locals call 8 or 9 species of sharks sand sharks. And they call black tips and fine tooth and black nose and on sand sharks. But this one's called a sandbar shark. And that's the only one kind of shark in the world, sandbar shark. And that's the only one kind of shark in the world is a sandbar shark. In other areas, it's called a brown shark, like in Australia, it's a brown shark, but it's the same thing.
Any other questions?
There was a very famous television biologist who had a show, and he was killed by, as I understand it, he was stung by a ray. Is that's the...
Yeah, Steve Irwin, and it was an unfortunate confluence of events. The rays will deploy. Some of the rays have barbs that are this long, and they're venomous. And if you are in shallow water sometimes, and I found myself in this situation, you're swimming over it, all of a sudden you look beneath you, there's a big ray. If you happen to be in the wrong place, they will rear up and sort of push their spine up, and it just hit him in the worst place you could possibly do it. I mean, what a tragic kind of unusual accident to happen. I've had one student stung by a barb, and they're so venomous. This one, I used to teach my students to hold the smaller rays. And I stopped after this one because I asked her to put her hand under it and drop it if if the tail came around, and she didn't drop it fast enough, and it just grazed her. I don't even think it broke the skin, but it maybe like a tenth of a millimeter, and she had to have surgery to remove to clean the wound. We took her immediately to Emergicare. They cleaned it out. Wasn't good enough. It was the venom was so toxic that it hurt her. So just have to be very careful when you're dealing with rays that have barbs. Now, not all rays do. The skates don't. The sawfish that you saw doesn't. Skates don't have the fleshy snouts that rays do, and they lay eggs, and rays give birth to live young. But they're all in the skates and rays lineage. They don't have barbs, so they're okay to handle.
I have a question about the blue spotted ribbon-tail ray. How fast can you die from getting poked by one?
So I barely heard that. So can you say it maybe a little bit louder, please?
How fast can you die from a blue spotted ribbon-tail ray?
Oh boy, that's a specific question. I don't know, I'm not a student of how venomous certain rays are. I know in the old days, if you got stung by, if you got a barb from a ray, and I think my father or somebody I heard that he had been impaled by a stingray barb. Olden days, what you did is you turned the motor on in your boat, and with the water-cooled engines, the water coming out was hot enough that would detoxify or coagulate the protein, and you'd be okay. So the most important thing to do in the field if you get stung is to rinse it out and put as hot a water as you can tolerate on it. This case where my student got stung, it was pretty bad because we had no hot water on the boat, and the first aid kit was nowhere to be found this time. I don't know where it was. And all I had was my oat milk latte that is the most precious thing in the world to me on the boat. And I had a Ziploc bag, so I had to pour it in a Ziploc bag, and she put the hot latte on her arm until we got her back in. But that's the quickest thing to do. I'm sure there's better, a physician would tell you a better, but that's the rule of thumb that we all go by. Cleanse the wound as quickly as possible and put hot water on it, as hot as you can tolerate.
Any other questions? I have one.
Mm-hmm.
How do you feel about like ecotourism with sharks and the little ray pools at zoos? What do you think about those?
Yeah. So like most things, it's a gray area. Some of the things I showed you in the beginning was not quite ecotourism, but it was students attracting sharks by provisioning them. And that's a lot of ecotourism, is when you put food out and you bring them out of their natural range. They may have inadequate nutrition. They learn to associate humans with food. There's a bunch of negative things that can happen that can upset the ecology and physiology of the animals. And then on top of that, a lot of the tour operators aren't the people in the country themselves that could benefit from it. So where it has potential to help protect sharks in a certain area, it doesn't always help the locals that should be the ones that benefit from it. So it has the potential to do real good in that there's nothing quite like seeing a shark or even a ray in its natural environment doing what they're supposed to be doing in the natural environment. And I've done it hundreds of times, and I've never I don't think I've ever traveled anywhere other than taking my class to Bimini, Bahamas to do that. I wanted to do a white shark dive one time, but the weather didn't cooperate. So I didn't get to do that. So here's a negative though, where the first video I showed you of us in the water with the aerial shot, the drone shot with all the Caribbean reef sharks. In Bimini, hotel complex now brings people out that come in for the day, either on a cruise ship or stay at the hotel, and they bring like 50 people out, and they jump in the water, and a lot of these people don't even know how to swim, and they're not wearing snorkeling vests. It's kind of scary, but they attract the sharks with a lot of food. And last time I had my students in Bimini, the sharks chased us out of the water because we weren't feeding them, and the other place had fed them. So we were a little bit frightened by how aggressive they were becoming, because they were looking at us like, well, if you're not going to give us food, you'll be the food. And these were like 8-foot Caribbean reef sharks. So I have mixed feelings. I guess I decided on a case-by-case basis. But if you're a shark enthusiast and you're not sure how to go about seeing a shark by yourself, then perhaps the best way to do it is through some sort of ethical ecotourism. That's probably the best I can say about that.
All right, thank you. Anybody else? Any last quick question?
That's okay. And you want to share those with anybody? So presentations via Zoom or that one tonight.
Thank you so much, Dan. Thank you, everybody, for coming.
Thank you. And Julia, please let me know which book you want me to send you all for the library.
What was that?
Please let me know which book you want me to send for your library.
Awesome. Thank you so much. We will get back to you about that.
Okay.
All right. Have a good night.